I'm Rebecca Kiessling, an attorney from Michigan in the United States, and as an attorney, I represented the mother in Michigan's frozen embryo case, which was the third in the nation and the first in Michigan. It was a dispute between the mother and father of 5 unborn children whose lives were suspended in liquid nitrogen tanks. And my client was the mother. She looked at her son, who was 3 years old when the case first began in 1997, and she realized that he could easily have been one of the 5 because he was conceived in the same grouping as her 5 other children. And so this was not a theoretical concept for her, but she understood that these are her children, just like her son, who's 3. And many people don't understand that frozen embryos are in fact living human beings. They are very much alive. The doctors in my case testified at deposition under oath that from conception, they are living human beings. They're absolutely alive and they're human in nature. In fact, they have a gender right from the moment of conception. They are literally male or female, and ascertainably so. In fact, in the current case involving famous actress Sofia Vergara and her ex-fiance Nick Loeb, they have 2 daughters. And Nick named both of the daughters. And a lot of people can't relate to the concept of a frozen embryo, but they can relate to the heart of a mother or a father for their child. The entire IVF industry is predicated upon the fact that these children are living human beings, because I ask people to consider the alternative. If they're not alive, then how do they thaw embryos and transfer them to a woman's womb? Because if they're transferring dead embryos, why bother freezing them? Because they're never going to make any money. No children will be born if these are dead. And if they're not human beings, then not only won't they make any money, they're going to get sued if they're not placing anything but living human beings inside of a woman's womb. But even just speaking about freezing children, I hope people understand just how absurd that idea sounds. And this is not something that Malta should ever engage in. This is a path you do not want to go down. In almost every frozen embryo case in the United States over the last couple of decades, judges have almost always, except for one case, ruled against the lives of the embryos, even when there were specific contracts that said that the mother or the father would be able to protect their children, to be able to have control of their children in the event of a breakup. And in my client's case, she was the only one who signed the contract. She was the only one listed as a patient. And yet the IVF clinic refused to thaw her embryos and transfer them to her womb, saying that she's divorced and she would have to get permission from the father. Well, the father said he wanted them destroyed. There was one case out of the state of Illinois that ruled that the mother could have the embryos and have the opportunity to have them thawed and transferred to her womb, but that was only because she had cancer, and they said that this was her last opportunity to have children. But in all the rest of the cases, they ruled against life. My co-founder of Embryo Defense is Halessia McQueen, and she fought for her own embryos all the way up to the Missouri Supreme Court. In her case, she had 2 children who were conceived in the same grouping, who were growing up, who she's raising, and then she had 2 other children who were frozen. And in her contract with her ex-husband, it specifically said that in the event of divorce, she would be able to have these children. But once they divorced, then he challenged that, and it went up to the Missouri Supreme Court. The judges completely went against state law that said that the judges are to abide by whatever the contract said, and they ruled against her lives. And so now her only alternative is to try to get the law changed. So here's a situation where both my client and Halesia were Catholic women, and they wanted to be fruitful and multiply, and they wanted to have children. And they thought that the Catholic Church recommended against freezing embryos for people who wouldn't respect life. And they thought, well, we're different. We're going to respect life. We have a contract. We have clear rights to be able to protect our children. And in the end, the courts got to decide. And once you make that decision to engage in IVF and to start freezing embryos, really you lose control as a parent. No matter what the law says, it's going to be in the hands of the court. It could end up being in the hands of the clinic. And so this is a very dangerous path for anyone to go on. The courts continue to rule that these are not persons but property. And that's very troubling, to have human beings treated as property. There are some people who try to suggest that a nation like Malta, who protects unborn children from conception, is antiquated. But the truth is that what's antiquated is treating children as property, treating human beings as property. That was a problem from the days of old, in ancient times, when children and even women were treated as property, when slaves were treated as property. And Malta has got it right, where people are not property.